What a fantastic event this has been. There's really an amazing set of speakers who've gone before me, so thanks so much to the WFBF crew for setting this up. As was mentioned, I'm Dan Doney, the CEO of SeCurrency, and I want to tell you a little bit about the history of tokenized securities. So we're big in securities tokenization, so if you really want to do a thing, it's good to know where that thing came from. So securities tokenization is actually not a new concept. In fact, it's medieval. So the first securities tokens were actually these bad boys. They're called tally sticks. And in the medieval time in England, the crown often needed loans. When they would get a loan from the nobility, they would mark the loan on a tally stick, and they would then break the stick. The lender would have the stock side of it, and the crown would hold the foil side of it. This was an immutable ledger, because if one side tried to modify what the terms of the loan were, you would match the stick together, and you could easily see that it didn't match the original terms of the loan. This term stock, by the way, is the original security. This is where the term stock market actually comes from. So in the 1800s, when the Crown was looking to eliminate the stocks, they actually had them burned, and it burned down Parliament. So you can look this up as a matter of history. Well, we moved beyond that, or almost a little bit beyond that, to accounting ledgers. But errors could be made easily in these human records associated with accounting records. So we moved from that to digital records and clearinghouses, Excel spreadsheets. So our small company, as a startup, we keep our cap table on a spreadsheet. But it's actually a regression from the early concepts here, where you had an immutable ledger. It's all too easy for someone at the law firm, or even in our own firm, to actually make a mistake on the ledger, even change the record. And this is where we are today, where the actual keeping of the records on a distributed ledger is a much better way to represent share ownership of a thing, that is securities. So we finally advanced to this point in our history. Now, it turns out, an immutable, transparent record of all transactions that actually allows you to see ownership of an entity all the way from its inception to the current time is every regulator's dream. So what we find is, where have we gone wrong in this, if in fact this is a platform that provides every regulator's dream? And we'll go into the details of what's gone wrong and what's been done to fix these problems. So enter SeCurrency. This is what in 2015, we actually entered this market as we saw a great opportunity in looking at the securitization problem. Securitization is arguably the most powerful tool in finance. It has been used to secure debt for some time and make it liquid. It also very nearly caused global financial collapse in 2008. And if you've seen The Big Short, you know the problem. It was a lack of transparency in these billion-dollar mortgage-backed securities pools that ultimately was the source of the problem. Well, if lack of transparency is the problem, the principal benefit of blockchain is a transparent, immutable ledger. And so as I was driving on my lawnmower, thinking about the problem, I realized, wait a minute here, there's a big fit. If we apply blockchain technologies to securitization, we can address one of the most fundamental problems in finance. And so we did. We built a platform in 2015 that allowed us to tokenize securities. We actually issued our first tokenized securities in 2015. It was a marvelous day. We recognized the benefits of securities combined with the liquidity of currencies is what gave rise to our company in SeCurrency. In 2015, we patented the concept of dividend-paying digital currencies. It was certainly a different world then, as folks were not looking into the compliance aspects of this, and there were really no stable forms of value in the crypto space. But we recognized right away these were securities. We couldn't argue that they weren't securities. It was even in the name of our company, these are securities. So we went to work. We knew we had to build out a compliance program that allowed us to issue and control securities on the framework. So we've got a 2-year head start on the rest of the industry. And what you're going to see, we demonstrated this to the SEC yesterday, is perhaps, in fact, we think for sure, the most sophisticated securities tokenization issuance tool out there, period. Okay, so what do you need to do to, what's been wrong with the ICO industry generally, and even to some degree the early days of securities tokenization? Well, the principal thing is absence of identity. So it is an absolute truth. You cannot have anonymity in compliance. So allowing transactions between unknown entities is simply a non-starter from a compliance perspective. It turns out you can have privacy without having anonymity. And in fact, that's what our platform ensures, as we are GDPR compliant in our approach to this. But the key piece is actually knowing, again, both ends of a transaction, who those individuals are, and whether or not they're qualified to participate in the transaction. Interestingly enough, blockchain is a global network. So if you can't do identity at global scale, you really can't do securities on the blockchain space. So we have the ability to do identity proofing and bank-level KYC in 160 countries, and with a high enough level to engage in securities transactions in 50 countries. This is a pretty substantial advantage on other folks who are in the space. We can go into more detail exactly what's required, but it's not just taking a person's passport or driver's license. Actually, another one of the big problems in the space, I'm sure you recognized before, was lack of standards in security. So the industry's been plagued by uneven security practices across the board. It's been mentioned in a few presentations before. Almost 10% of contributions to ICOs is outright stolen. So it's the uneven security practices that the industry has to address. We've subjected ourselves to the Pci Dss Certification process. It's an external auditing process that's used in the credit card industry. It's actually quite robust. And we'd recommend those folks who are in the securities tokenization space undergo the same sort of audit. The audit's been around for a while. The specifications are pretty robust. And it is a high standard. It takes quite a bit of work to actually comply. There are other issues as well, but all of this is keeping institutional money out of the space. Here's what we've done to address this. We demoed these capabilities to the Treasury Department and to the Securities Exchange Commission yesterday. And as I mentioned, there's a strong reaction to the strength of this platform, because this creates, in the end, a self-reporting financial services infrastructure, one in which every transaction, all participants are known and properly qualified in order to participate in the transaction. All transactions can be properly reported to the government authorities as required for tax reporting and Bank Secrecy Act and otherwise, and where offerings can actually come to market with unprecedented efficiency. And that's, in fact, what our platform does. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the key pillars of how we do this and go into a little bit more detail in terms of how this is done. The first important component is, as I mentioned, global scale KYC AML. We think we have the most sophisticated KYC framework. This had been used in financial service settings before, but we're fairly certain the most sophisticated in the crypto world, and we actually think it may be the most sophisticated in the financial services world. We can give you some more backing for why that's true, but it works at global scale. Additionally, you must do investor qualification. And look, it's not just a US market. So accredited investor status is actually fairly easy to identify. Under certain securities laws, it's not enough to allow people to self-certify. But the SEC has been very clear in terms of its practices. But there's different qualifications as well. It's not just US qualifications. Other countries, most countries, have their own qualification process that we incorporate into our platform. Source of funds verification is a very key piece. This was the folks at FinCEN particularly liked this capability. Look, the history of blockchain is unfortunately a checkered past. So in 2012, the predominant use of blockchain networks was for illicit activity. So there's a lot of bad money that exists in this space. And so you have to have a way of actually making sure that the money that comes into an investment is actually coming from legitimate sources. So we use AI techniques to actually perform background checks on the wallets themselves, and we risk score across 20 different categories in order to allow you to see the legitimacy of the contribution that's being made. What we want to do is have a good financial services network where we can keep it good and clean with good and reliable offerings. So these all have to do with investor onboarding and automating those processes. It's also important to disclose risks, and we actually have an issuer workflow. It's a step. We literally can issue new securities straight from a cap table, taking and ingesting a spreadsheet and tokenizing that spreadsheet. This is another piece that we showed to the SEC yesterday. The ability to just ingest a traditional private placement, make it blockchain-enabled, build into those tokens the securities rules that allow for distribution control and allow this to then be traded and transferred and produce the cap table associated with that asset in real time, understanding foreign ownership and other factors, again, in real time. But it's also very important to have a workflow that protects investors and makes sure that risks are properly disclosed. We have this workflow. So issuers are actually able to, with the click of a button, spin up their own servers and engage in their own token offering, which has all of the compliance components built into the framework and where they can enroll investors in a step-by-step way to issue new tokens. Okay, and then the final piece that had everyone excited for our demonstration yesterday was these two components, securities and revenue service reporting and insider trade and market manipulation detection. So one of the powerful things about the blockchain networks, we have big data processing capabilities associated with this platform. We're able to fuse data from the blockchain networks as well as external sources. This allows us to do real-time, as I mentioned, like, for example, capital gains reporting with any of the issuances that we do. But we can also do insider trading and market manipulation detection. This has been a big issue in the crypto markets of late. It was something that folks are looking for solutions to. We demonstrated this capability yesterday, and it was well received. I mentioned the ability, primary and secondary market distribution control. I saw the Polymath folks are here as well. They have a good solution in this space. We also have a very mature solution in this space that allows you to take securities regulations worldwide and break them down into recipes. We have a visual interface that allows you to do this. You actually design the securities rules into a recipe. The recipe, for example, for a Reg D offering, there's about 12 assertions that are required, and you can design this. You can actually custom design. So if I wanted to issue a token that was only available to US veterans or MIT grads and Reg D participants, I can do this in designing my recipe. These are attached to the token. They control the distribution of the token, such that only qualified participants can engage in this offering. This is powerful because Reg D, actually there are many flavors of Reg D if you're a security specialist. We can implement each of those flavors as recipes. In fact, we have law firms who are designing those recipes, but they can do Reg A+, Reg CF, as well as FCA, that is in the UK's regulatory framework. We're also in the UAE. We're about to open a crypto exchange and then later a securities exchange there. We're able to implement each government's regulations into these recipes in a verifiable way such that the regulator can see, as well as the issuer doesn't have to be a securities expert, to ensure that securities law is enforced with these tokens. Okay, so that's what we do. SeCurrency is about securities tokenization. We've been flying below the radar screen because we're pretty confident we have the strongest technology out there. We're about to pop up and show people what we've got. We're eager to let you all know. You'll see us in September for sure. And I'm happy to answer questions afterwards regarding any of these technologies, capabilities. And by the way, we decompose them so others can actually use the pieces that we've put together if you want to do your own or if you have your own platform. Thank you.